Alright, I'm just gonna come out and say it. At this point, I think Wistoria Wand and Sword is rapidly approaching peak fantasy status, and we will get into exactly why as we go over episode 2 in this one. Now, the reason why I am getting more and more engrossed and engaged with this anime, and why I think it is approaching peak fantasy status with what it's doing, is manifold. This world has been built very well so far. The world building is consistent. The music and the outfits people have, how people just interact and engage in the world, and how it's all set up so far, just really make it up to be a engaging, authentic feeling, immersive world. And most anime is not able to really replicate this or make this immersive feeling as well as Wistoria currently is. This can be seen in even the small things. For example, in this episode, when Will is getting into his locker, he has to get the help of Colette, his friend, to open the locker using magic, because that's how it works in this world, right? You have just even a simple locker is locked and unlocked with a sort of spell or whatever else. And even though that is super minor, just imagine the difference with having that as it is in the anime versus having, let's say, a standard sort of combination lock on the lockers, right? I mean, that would just pull you out and be like, really? That doesn't seem like it fits in this fantasy world. Exactly. And with every little small thing like that the show has put in, and keeps putting in, and will continue to put in, that will just keep dragging you more into the world, making the world feel alive, feel fleshed out, feel like this is its own universe, and you can really just immerse yourself in it and enjoy it. Of course, you might say that is still nothing compared to what Frieren was able to accomplish, but while Frieren is a beast in and of itself, so I'm not going to make comparisons to that anytime soon here. But in terms of just this being a really immersive and so far very solid fantasy, and with how they are handling the narrative and mixing the narrative with, battles and everything else, is really, really an enjoyable ride so far. And why at this point, again, I think this is going to be peak fantasy in no time. Might even be better than Danmachi if it keeps going in this direction, because Danmachi always to me felt a bit more on the light fantasy side. That, though, brings us into the meat of this episode, and that is this beautiful narrative battle that Edward had with Will, as of course Edward was in a very bad mood after seeing Will in the last episode dealing with this monster. First of all, I have to just praise the animation once again. The animation quality for this anime, especially in the fight scenes, seem to be just top-notch. Like, it feels fluid, it feels great, it looks great, and if they just keep this animation up the entire season, I mean, god damn, that is going to be very impressive. I'm not sure the budget of this show, but holy, this animation cannot be cheap, is all I can say. And it also just really makes the show more immersive because the fight scenes look so good and feel so good that you just live yourself into it way more than you would otherwise if it was on the other side, being way more cheap looking. But yes, this battle that he has with Edward, the professor, is far from just being a simple battle, right? What this anime does very well, and will hopefully keep doing well, is that the fights don't just serve a single purpose. As in any good show, the fights serve multiple purposes, and in this case, yes, it is serving the narrative, it is serving to underpin Will's motivations, his determination, and it works to push the narrative forward, not just have this fight scene in and of itself. In particular, I like how basically Edward is the antithesis and the embodiment of every element that is working towards Will in this world. He is the most elitist of the elites in terms of magic, being a magic supremacist, I suppose, to the largest extent of the word, and him being basically the embodiment of adversity for Will, and him in that cause having this confrontation with him, to me at least, makes it feel like Will is also having a confrontation against not just Edward, but, against this whole institution and this whole worldview that magic is all and nothing else matters. I do also like the parallel and sort of allegory they put in when Will talks about this battle between the dwarves and the elves, or I guess humans? Anyway, magic users, where the dwarves were without magic, but they still faced the opposing side because they wanted to be recognized, etc. And a single mage took out an entire dwarf army of 10,000, of course illustrating the difference in power, but one brave dwarf general just got one hit in on the mage, and by doing that, earned respect and status that the dwarves wanted. And of course, you can draw very many parallels to that with what Will is able to do when he is able to get his hit in on Edward. And of course, with Edward begrudgingly accepting his strength in a way. Perhaps we'll have to see how that develops. But I did like that parallel in the fight itself, and it made it feel more impactful as well. And more like this is more of an existential thing as well, not just Will versus Edward, but this is a battle between, the magic users and everyone else, and the ones that in the past, now with Will, and anyone in the future that might want to fight for recognition in this world of wands and magic. And yes, as I mentioned, the fight does do a pretty good job as well of just sort of drawing out why exactly Will is doing what he's doing. And we already got a good indication of that last episode, but when he is confronted by Edward in this case of, why are you pushing so hard? Why do you have this steel determination of becoming a Magia Vander? With Will, of course, in the end spieling that, yes, I want to be with Elfie. I want to be with my childhood love, I guess, my friend, and I want to keep my promise to her and see the sunset with her from the top of the tower. I mean, of course, I understand in a sense why Edward is like, really? That's it? That's the reason you're pushing this hard? But well, to Will, that is everything. So, yes. To him, that is way more important than any other sort of ideal that Edward might be thinking that he had. And also just the commentary we get from Will through the fight, that, he's scared. He is unsure of himself. It's like, yeah, I'm shaking. I want to run away. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't really want to just face what is basically a Magica Vander in and of itself here, though he technically got defeated, but he's as close to a Vander as anyone down here. I mean, I want to just run away. I want to just get out of here. Like, this is crazy. I could die, basically, right? But still, just again showcasing that, no, I made a promise. I'm here for a reason, and I'm going to push through any adversity that comes my way, risk it all to achieve what I have set out to achieve, and fulfill the promise that I made all that time ago. And I did quite like how they did that, and it felt impactful, And that is also why the battle, as I mentioned, feels as good as it does. Yes, of course, the smooth animation, the great animation, all of that makes the fight feel good, of course. But when you have these underlying narrative elements to the fight, it just makes it just that much more impactful to you watching, because you feel like he's doing it for a reason. You feel like there is more here than just pure people fighting people and swords fighting wands. Like, there's an underlying meaning and purpose here that I would say most people can sort of gel with, and just makes them feel more engaged in what's going on. After the fact, I did find it interesting that Werkner sort of explains that, okay, so he used the lack of vision that the explosions from the magic cost to create a diversion, get above him in the blind spot, to then attack and destroy his defenses. Like, oh, that's what he did. Okay. That wasn't super clear to me during the fight. Maybe I just wasn't paying enough attention, but at least I find it good that someone explained his strategy and why exactly he moved the way he did in the fight. I guess maybe they could have had Will explain that himself as he was doing it, but that might have subtracted from the fight itself and been clunky, so I guess it's fine doing it this way as well. At least someone explained what exactly he did strategy-wise, though it wasn't apparent to me that that was what he did at the time I watched the fight. I just wasn't paying enough attention, I guess. I don't know. Or maybe it was just not communicated that well. I don't know. Anyways, though, don't have any complaints about the fight at all. Very, very satisfied with that entire section of the episode for sure. And of course, there's always the feeling of catharsis and just like, yes, that goddamn bastard Edward finally getting some of what he deserves and being proven wrong. And that just feels great, right? For anyone basically watching this. Unless I guess you're on Edward's side, which I suppose is the very minority of people watching this show. But I'm sure there are a few people. On a final note on the battle itself, again, I do like the small things they include. For example, when Edward says, is that a Moria blade? When he will, for the first time, strikes through his magic. Like, okay, world building, adding in small elements here of why he's able to do what he does. In this case, a Moria blade, I assume, being some sort of special material that can actually slice through magic, and that explains somewhat why he's able to do it in the first place. And even just the very small animated things that's not, talked about, but you can see, for example, when Will gets up from the ground at one point in the fight, and just his, hands pushing into the ground, shatters the floor. Or when he jumps or whatever later in the fight, his footprint, again, just shattering a piece of the floor, leaving a dent in the floor. It's like, wow, you can just feel and see the power, the strength that he has without needing to mention it, without needing to highlight it. You can just see that, damn, okay, I get it. And again, those small things, when done in succession throughout episodes, throughout an entire series, just makes a show feel so much better than it would have otherwise. Anyhow, though, if you're liking this video so far, do please remember to like and subscribe. It greatly helps out the channel, so thank you. Next, I do want to talk a bit about the Headmaster, which we get introduced to, and the contrast between Edward and Werkner. So the Headmaster, or Headmistress, I suppose, but Headmaster, she is an interesting character so far. First, we get the flashback at the beginning of the episode when we learn that, okay, so Will was basically only let into the school because his childhood friend maybe wouldn't go without him, and because everyone wanted her because she was so talented, they let Will in, but when she graduated to becoming a vendor, well, he was then kind of useless. He didn't have a purpose anymore. So many wanted him kicked out, he was bullied, of course, and all that good stuff. But Werkner, who apparently saw potential in him, etc., pled to the headmistress or master to let him stay on. So she did. Why exactly? Well, it is not exactly determined yet. She does later in the episode talk about like the fated day, etc., and that the mission of the school is to have people that they can train and educate to be ready for that day to, I guess, defend their world against whatever may come. I assume the fated day has something to do with the sky falling again, but anyhow. But it's not quite certain what the Headmaster here, Cauldron, as she is called, apt name considering the cauldron behind her in her office. It's not quite certain what her ultimate goal here is, because she lets Will stay on because of Werkner and his pleas to that regard, but she also takes Edward's concern into consideration and lets him test Will, and expel him if he can't, pass his test. You might say she is doing that because she wants to show Edward firsthand how powerful he really is, but still her motivations or plans are still somewhat clouded. It's far from clear what she is hoping to accomplish with Will or that entire length of exchanges so far. She doesn't seem to like Will necessarily, but she doesn't have anything against him either. She seems to have just an overall arching goal, which I suppose is the fated day, and she has some sort of game plan, and she will do what needs to be done to be as prepared for that as she can be, ? I'm sure we will get more insight into her character moving forward in the season. But yes, of course, the Headmaster in the first place also only let Will stay in the school because, well, he basically instantly fended off her attacks with a small dagger, I guess, when she randomly tested him when Werkner was pleading his case in the first place. So I suppose she sees something in him, at least. For the professors, though, I do like the stark contrast between Werkner and Edward. Like, they can't be much more different in terms of, well, their entire personality and motivations and just sense of being. Werkner seemingly being much more compassionate, seeing the other side of things, being much more open to, well, non-wand users and seeing the potential in Will, etc. While Edward being, of course, the exact polar opposite, being a mega wand supremacist and being closed off to any other way but magic, the magic or the highway approach. And I look forward to seeing how these two professors and these two characters will continue to sort of clash together over the course of the season, and how their interactions might change, or how the personalities, characters might change due to their interactions moving forward. We'll have to see. Anyway, they do throw in a few small world-building things in the episode. For example, when Werkner has his supplemental lesson, of course, you get, again, the highlight of this is how you reach the upper level. You need 7,200 points or to make a new spell, etc. I do like how they are giving exposition in this show. They aren't just blurring out exposition because they want the viewer to know it. They try to include it in the world and what is going on there. For example, again, in this case, when they're talking about how to advance to become a vendor, it's in the course of a supplemental lesson for Will and other students. So it makes sense why this would be told to them, right? And we get the exposition at the same time. Incorporating exposition in a logical way in world, in universe like this is the hallmark of a quality show, instead of other shows that will just blurt out exposition because it's time to have exposition, which is very lazy. I was actually also surprised that Sion's goons aren't dead. Like, really? You're not dead? Seriously? When you were hit across the room into the wall, and I'm sure you were bleeding, but you didn't die? God damn. What are you made of? Alright, I guess so. Well, no deaths. Sad. So the goons are alive, and of course they are praising Sion's name. And we get a bit of interaction between Sion and Will again, with Sion clearly having some issues and probably feeling inadequate, feeling weak, and having that sort of bursting out at Will in public. It'll be interesting to see more of Sion's character moving forward and how he deals with this revelation that he is actually much weaker than he thought, and the person he ridiculed the most as being the weakest, most useless there is actually so far surpassing him in terms of power. But yes, how he will deal with that and how we will have those interactions are going to be interesting later in the season, I'm sure. We do also learn that Will has a roommate friend who is apparently making him amu rice or something at the end of the episode. So I'm sure we will see more of them later. As I mentioned at the start though, the world building here, even with the small things like the lockers being opened and closed by magic, those small things really add up, and I really love every single small detail like that. Then we get a bit more info on the elves and dwarves, apparently both being otherworldly, so I suppose they came from another world to the world of humans with Will and whatnot, but we do still need way more info on why exactly that came to be. And of course, yes, as I mentioned before, we get the story of the dwarves and how they were sort of repressed and taken advantage of, and then finally they rebelled and won, I suppose, some sort of respect and status after this dwarf general got his single hit against this mage defending against them. And of course, how that parallels to current events and I'm sure future events also. Anyhow though, I'm absolutely liking this show a lot. I mean, it is definitely to me approaching sort of peak fantasy levels already. I love the sort of route they're going here. I like really the quality you feel throughout this anime so far. The battle scenes animation is top tier. The music is great, really fitting. The entire world feels alive, feels immersive, and it really just starts to drag you in the more you watch. And if it continues on this road, I can only imagine it will be an absolute banger in terms of quality and engagement and everything else by the end of the season. So you can definitely tell that this is from a seasoned creator, in this case, the creator of Danmachi. You know, he knows what he's doing, he knows how to write stories, and yeah, I can only say I'm very hyped to see more, and I absolutely do hope that this anime has meant itself as a sort of peak fantasy by the end of the season, and that we get many more seasons of this engaging story that I can only feel will be absolutely epic if it goes into a multiple season arc before the inevitable end and hopeful semi-good resolution. Anyway though, what do you think of episode 2 of Wistoria Wand and Sword? Leave all those thoughts down below, or any other thoughts on my commentary or analysis of episode 2. That being said, hope you have a nice day, keep watching anime, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.